Welcome, everyone, to Creating a Family. Talk about adoption and foster care. Today, we're going to be talking with a panel of birth moms. We have Kelsey Vandervliet. She is a birth mom to a 3-year-old boy and an open adoption. She was raised in the Midwest, but now lives in Los Angeles and is attending Southwestern Law School. And we have Katie Monroe. She placed her daughter 17 years ago. She has since then gone on to complete her master's degree in social work. And she has primarily worked with expectant parents who are considering or making an adoption plan. She is now married and parenting 3 daughters. And we have Laura Blanco. She is the mom to a 3.5-year-old son that she placed for adoption. And she enjoys a very open adoption relationship. Welcome, Kelsey, Katie, and Laura to Creating a Family. We are so glad to have you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, I think it would help for everybody to kind of get a lay of the land to understand what your adoption looks like, from an openness, contact, all that type standpoint. So, Laura, let's start with you. What does your son is 3.5, and he was placed at birth. I guess everybody's children were placed at birth. So tell us, what does your adoption look like?
Mine is a very open adoption and very fortunate to have it. Originally, I was hoping to get just 2 visits a year, and the adoptive dad was like, well, how about every other month? And I said, sold. So I get to see him every other month. He knows me as Bunny. He knows me as his birth mom. He's kind of shocked me the other day by saying, I was in your belly. And I'm like, yes, you were. Wow. We also share a group text, and I get a couple of updates through that. But primarily my updates come with each visit. So it's a very, very awesome open adoption.
Okay, good. Kelsey, what does your adoption look like?
So it looked a little different. I used to live in Indianapolis, and I moved out west about a year ago. So when I lived in close proximity, we had probably 5 or 6 visits a year. And then we text and we'll FaceTime and call maybe like once a month. But now I see him I saw him once in the past year, and then I will probably continue on that by seeing him once or twice, probably max. But it's nice. We have a close relationship. We talk. We still text, and we'll FaceTime every once in a while. So it's gotten a little more few and far between over the past year. But I also think that's because he's 3, and it's just gotten less and less over the years. So, but it's still consistent and steady.
Do you feel like that the diminishing of contact is more from the adoptive parent standpoint or from your standpoint?
I think we both contributed to that because I moved. So I definitely did that part. But yeah, I think I get less texts from them. I think they have another son, and I think that life gets busy, and, that's just kind of reality.
Yeah. Okay. Katie, tell us what your adoption looks like. You have had, your daughter is 17, so you have the most longevity here.
Yeah. So I placed 17 years ago, and at the time, I think that was considered an open adoption because I knew their information. We exchanged all of that. But I would say over the years, for modern, sake, it's probably more semi in the fact that I haven't seen my daughter since the hospital. And so what it's looked like is that it's been, pictures and updates. In those early years, maybe until she was about 4 or 5, it was pretty regular, probably 3 or 4 times a year. Also during those years, I would get lunch with the adoptive mom on a regular basis. So I'd get those kinds of updates. And then through the years, it's kind of diminished. Her adoptive mom actually friended me on Instagram. And so sometimes I will get an update that way, or she'll send me a text. But it's pretty sporadic. Now there's no consistency in what the relationship kind of looks like, or the updates look like.
And from your standpoint, how is the inconsistency or the unpredictability something that is you're fine with, or does it make it more difficult for you?
I think it's complicated because on one hand, it's something I accept because it's reality, but there are definitely times that I wish it was more consistent or was more predictable. I also placed in an era where there weren't contact agreements. It was kind of like a gentleman's handshake. Yeah, we agree to send you this, but there was no predictability to it. Yeah. So
Okay.
it's complicated.
Okay. All right. And then it does sound like I think by the terminology we use now, it would be considered semi-open. So, Katie, from your standpoint, what are your plans will you reach out to her? Are you going to wait for her to reach out to you? Is there an age that you feel is that you want to wait until she is whatever age? Or do you feel like you need to work through her adoptive parents? Or is this not anything that at this point you are interested in?
No, it's for sure something I'm thinking about because I think through her life, I've always anticipated like 18. Oh, you're an adult when you're 18 and maybe something would happen then. I realize it may very well not. I think, and she just recently turned 17. So we're kind of in that year. Would something happen? Could something happen? Could it be another 10 years? My plan is to reach out to her adoptive mom and send her a note and just check in that way. I don't plan to reach out to her without speaking to her adoptive parents first.
Her mom. Okay. So we got questions from adoptive parents and adoptees, and they wanted to know your thoughts on a variety of things. One of which is options counseling. If you received it from an adoption agency, did you feel like there was a conflict of interest? Did you think it was adequate? So, yeah, let me start with you, Kelsey.
My options counseling was kind of not really a thing, I guess. I went to a pregnancy center at some point. I have a weird experience with that. I went to a Planned Parenthood and then I went to a pregnancy center. And everyone, I think the only thing that people didn't offer to me was parenting. And it was everything. I felt very pulled in either direction. I didn't feel pulled by the pregnancy center. I only went there once and they were very supportive to me because I was very scared. And they really just walked me through talking to my mom about being pregnant because I hadn't told her. So they didn't really do options counseling. I just don't think I was at that stage with them. I went to them with like shock. And with Planned Parenthood, the route they wanted me to go was abortion. And then with everyone in my life, it was very much like adoption or go back to the clinic and get an abortion. And so I never felt like anyone, not the right person, I guess, was telling me, was giving me unbiased options counseling. So,
and when you connected with an agent, or did you eventually connect with an agency?
I went with a private attorney who does matching and stuff in Indiana. And no, I never received options counseling from them either.
Okay. Let's see. Katie, what about you? 17 years ago, who counseled you on what your options were, which might include adoption, but might include other things as well?
Well, I think I still do have a very supportive family. And so we sought counseling separate from an agency or an attorney or a pregnancy center. We went to just a therapist. And so I do believe she did provide me with options counseling, but it was all on our own. It wasn't, by the time I got to where I was going to make an adoption plan, then the agency that we worked with, it was very sided towards adoption and not of their fault. So I don't know that the attorney or the agency would have done that, but we did that as a family on our own.
Mm-hmm. Okay, Laura, what about you? Were you counseled by anyone? And if so, what was that experience like? Was it fair? Was it unbiased?
So my first, round of counseling came from family friends the day I found out. And she kind of, we talked through all three options. And she had experience, the mom of the family, she had experience with another family friend of theirs who had such difficulty with infertility. And so she knew about the adoption world because it's something that they were exploring like a couple of years before I found out. And so she kind of gave me just a good framework about what to think about the three different options. Personally, I did not think abortion was going to be the best option for me and my child. So that was off the table immediately. And by the time I made it to my adoption agency, my heart was set on adoption. And so I kind of came about that on my own before I went to my agency. And my agency was very good about being hands-off as far as letting me make my decision. So I knew my options before I made it to the agency, but they made it clear that if I did choose to parent the child, that they would be completely supportive of me and helping me with the resources and whatnot. Okay. So as far as the options counseling, that was more on my own and through family friends.
Okay. There are some in the adoption world who feel like pre-birth matching is coercive to expectant women or expectant parents, that it would be better to not allow expectant parents to know anything and to make choices about the adoptive parents. There are other people who feel that it's fair. It's a fair thing for this big of a decision, that expectant parents have the ability to have time on their side when making this decision. Thoughts on that, Katie? Do you feel that pre-birth matching has a coercive element where it puts too much pressure on the expectant parents once they meet the adoptive parents and get to know them to place? Or is it a good thing because it allows the expectant parents to have time?
Yeah, well, I'm not even sure I fully understand what people who don't agree with having the mom have the ability to match pre-birth, what they would do. Where would that child go? You know, I really believe in early life stability for a newborn, and this is a significant trauma. So if they then think this child should go from home to home to home before it, goes into an adoptive family, then I would certainly not agree with that. And in my experience personally, and even professionally, just looking on, again, I don't have the inner thoughts of the women that I work with, but I do believe that there is a sense of like peace that comes when you've selected that family. Now, certainly you still have the option to not choose adoption, but there is an element of relief. Okay, this is moving towards something. So I definitely, I think there could be coercion involved in it if it's not done correctly, but I think it's a right for a mom that they have that option.
Laura, thoughts on that then?
I'm going to echo their last phrase there. I think it is a right for a expectant mom and father to find their match. I know for me and my story personally, I was still very fuzzy, experiencing a lot of anxiety up until I met my family, up until I called up my counselor and I told her, like, I want this family. I feel a connection with them. And having made that decision and made that choice to place with that specific family, and having, seen their profile and almost start to envision what this child's life is going to be like in their family, and seeing their pictures and everything, I got the peace that I received from making that decision and shaking hands with them and seeing them face to face. I know they were no longer strangers. They were a family that I was entrusting my child to. And I cannot fathom at all having to make that decision post-birth. Mm-hmm. That would be just crazy. And again, what exactly would be the alternative to placing, or the alternative like to post-birth choice? Would my child be shopped around, or not shopped around, but like handed off from foster home to foster home? That's kind of the reason why I went through with adoption and placing him into the arms of a family I chose, instead of trusting him to foster care, which there's some issues with foster care. Let's be honest. I wanted to make sure that my child had a home to go to that I knew, that I was entrusting them to. And it was the last bit of control that I had over his life before I surrendered my rights to them, technically to the agency, but paperwork is paperwork. I knew who he was going to. And that gave me probably the most amount of peace out of my entire journey with adoption.
Okay. Kelsey, any thoughts from your experience?
Yeah. I hear this argument. I've heard this a couple times about how pre-birth matching is coercive. And I really do think, like, in an effort to make things sometimes, like, in people's minds, an effort to make things more ethical for us, they're taking our choices away sometimes. And it's really frustrating to me to hear, because a lot of times I hear these things and it's not even coming from birth moms about the choice that the birth mom makes. And so I can't imagine going through my adoption process and being told, like, you're going to have to endure this 9 months all alone, and you can't pick a family till after, or you can't get to know them until after. And that time I spent getting to know my son's family was so important. And you're able to build this relationship. And if I chose to parent after I gave birth, and then that was going to be okay. So I just don't understand, I guess, how that plays into, realistic terms. I understand that there are a lot of parts about adoption that can be extremely coercive. And I do believe that the conditions of a match could be coercive, as far as who the parents are, or what the agency acts like, or how people conduct themselves in this relationship. But the concept alone of pre-birth matching, I don't believe is coercive. And I know there's a lot of women that have matched after, or they've placed afterwards, or their children have gone to like cradle care in between that time. And that's their choice. As long as that's that woman's choice, I have no qualms. But if it's not her choice, and we're now forcing this woman to do extra things that she, can't do, and we can't like paint with a broad brush in adoption. So that's my 2 cents.
As long as we're talking about coercion, another thing that we hear it could be coercive is when hopeful adoptive parents attend either doctor's appointments with the expectant mom, or their presence at the hospital, or even their presence at birth, during the birth itself. So thoughts on that? Kelsey, we'll start with you this time.
Okay. I think, to reiterate my points from before, is it's got to be her choice, because I know women, for me personally, I can say I didn't want them in the room when I was giving birth. I didn't really involve them too much in the hospital. They came on the second day I was in the hospital, and I literally let them spend a couple hours with him while I caught up on sleep. And that was it, because I wanted my full time with him. But I know women that wanted them in the hospital, or I know women that didn't have literally anyone else in their life, and they needed someone to be there. And they thought in their mind, who better to be there than these people that I've decided to place with. Still, I still believe that she should be able to change her mind, but I just think that it's got to be her choice. She's got to be in control in that situation.
I think that what I hear is that it's presented to expectant moms that this is how it's supposed to be done. Mm-hmm. So it's not a full choice that she's making. It's a choice that is presented as kind of a fait accompli, that this is how it's done type of thing. Yeah. I'm not maybe articulating it completely well, but I think that it sounds like in your case, you had total control and wasn't presented that way.
I think all the decent, agencies, attorneys are going to properly inform her of the choice and tell her that the hospital plan is 110% up to her. Obviously, there's a lot of corruption in adoption, and I have no doubt in my mind that places are telling women that this is how it's supposed to be done. And I definitely don't back that whatsoever.
Okay, Laura, what was your experience, and do you feel like that attending doctor's appointments or, OBGYN appointments and being present at the hospital is putting undue pressure?
I think it should be entirely up to the mother. And I think that should be part of the options counseling. You're making an adoption plan that also includes your birth plan, that also includes your doctor's visit plan. Like, keep the control in the expectant mother's hands, I think is right, and probably what we need to do. For me, I did not want them in a doctor's office. I was still getting freaked out by the sonogram, or not the sonogram, but like the heartbeat monitor, whatever it's called. I still freaked out whenever I heard the heartbeat because, that's still like it was just something I could not really understand, and I didn't want to have that weird. The hopeful adoptive mother was super excited about, hearing the heartbeat of her hopeful son. And I'm just like, there's a thing inside me. So I did not want them in the room. Also, I didn't know them until about 2 months before I gave birth. I did not make my plan or didn't commit to an agency until about 2 months before I gave birth. So I was pretty late to the game, according to another agency I went to. But as far as, the agency that I placed through, they were super hands-off as far as allowing me to make my own decisions. But I did want the mother in the room with me, in the birthing room. And it was probably one of the most beautiful moments of my story is having both me, the birth mother, and then her, the adopted mother, in the room, and I let her cut the cord. Just in my mind, that was a way for me to almost give her child, was to cut the cord from me. But that was my story, and it had a really surreal story as far as like all the little intricate details. But I can definitely see how, especially the doctor's visits, that can be on the coercive side of things, especially that whole heartbeat thing. But it's entirely up to the expectant mother. And
Okay.
that should be the normal practice is how do you want the hopeful adoptive parents to be involved with your
Okay.
medical stuff.
Okay. Katie, any thoughts that are, do you agree kind of with the, what's been said up to this point?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Okay. And another question that we got is, what were you looking for when you were choosing an adoptive family? What were the factors that, and I asked this knowing full well that it is so individual, but what were factors that were important to you when making this choice? Katie, let's start with you.
I struggle maybe answering this because it's kind of been a touchy subject for me through the years because I don't really feel like I was provided with that many options.
How many families did you choose from?
3 or 4, maybe.
Okay.
So I struggle because I just don't think I was provided with enough. I don't agree with sending people 100, but I don't agree with the practice of limiting the number of options to that professional, like that attorney's pot of families or that agency's pot of families. I think that's a terrible practice that goes on daily in this industry.
Okay. Kelsey, some thoughts on that?
What I looked for in a family, I looked for something that was familiar. I looked for something that was similar to the way that I grew up. I looked for financial stability and emotional stability, and someone that was, I don't know, that just was like, kind of felt like my personality, that we would get along. And I mean, I think that's what I found, definitely.
And Laura, what were you looking for?
Primarily a Georgia family who's looking for an open adoption. And then from that, I had about 5 families to choose from. And the family I went with, they just seemed to have the most open personalities as far as what their interests were. They weren't super like hyper focused and passionate about one thing. They just had just a general variety of interests, and they love to travel, which is something that I hoped for my child or future children, is that we could be in a place where we can travel and explore different cultures and whatnot. And that family seemed to have that, all of that. And then to echo what Kelsey said, the emotional stability and the financial stability that I could not provide. And my family, those all check marks in that.
Good. All right. Let me pause for a moment and remind people that this show is underwritten by the Jockey Being Family Foundation, and their mission is post-adoption support. And one of the ways that Jockey Being Family does that is through their backpack program. It is for agencies to apply. It is free for the agency and free for the families. If the agency applies, all of their newly adopted families get a backpack with the child's initials embroidered. And then inside the backpack is a bear, a little stuffed plush bear, and a blanket, and a tote bag full of parenting resources for the parents. So if you're an agency or if you're a parent and you would like your agency to participate, let them know about this. And they go to the website, jockeybeingfamily.com, and click on the backpack program. And it's super easy to sign up, and all of your families will have access to this. Okay, so another topic that it seems like all the topics I'm raising are, controversial topics, but that's what all the questions came in on. So when adoptive parents fundraise to pay for adoption, let's be honest, adoption is not inexpensive. And many parents have the money to raise a child, but not the cash in the bank to necessarily pay for the adoption out of hand. So what we see more now is adoption fundraising, where parents do any number of things, anywhere from a GoFundMe or from yard sales or spaghetti suppers at church, things like that, to raise money to help pay for the adoption. Well, this brings to mind about how expectant parents would feel about this, because in fact, oftentimes financial issues are a motivating factor for placing. So let me ask, what are your thoughts about adoptive parents fundraising to pay for an adoption? Laura?
I've seen some stuff on this on Instagram, people going back and forth. I don't see an issue with it. It takes a village to raise a child, and if they're going to adopt and answer the call to adopt, it takes a village to adopt a child and raise it. And so I don't see an issue to that. Yeah, one of the reasons I placed was I did not have a financial support personally to raise the child. I mean, I'm still trying to figure out what career I want to do, and definitely have not made enough in the past 3 years to barely support myself. So I can understand that correlation where, well, if an expectant mother is placing because of financial difficulties and she hears the adoptive parents are fundraising, what's that like?
Yeah.
What does she think about that? I wouldn't have the money to raise them anyway. And if they have the money to raise, but not to, you adopt, and they need a little extra help from their village, why not? Why is that an issue? Yeah.
Mm-hmm. All right. Katie, what are your thoughts?
I am conflicted on it. I think if they provided her with the full information, then go right ahead. But I doubt that some of them would be comfortable enough sharing how much they raised with that mom that is asking them, to place their child with them. So I think if they were fully honest about what they raised, then great. And she's all on board with that, then cool. But I think if people are out there raising $20,000, then as an expectant mom, I'd be like, wait, why? Why do you need $20,000? And why is this costing $20,000 or $30,000 or $40,000 or whatever that number is? And if you needed that, are you going to be able to provide for my child? So I think if the information was shared, then I'm cool with it.
Okay, Kelsey, thoughts?
Yeah, I actually wrote an article on this, earlier this year. And I took a couple surveys from people on, what their thoughts were. And at the end of it, I kind of concluded with, if you're not feeling comfortable with the way that you're fundraising as adoptive parents, and if what you're doing is making you feel kind of icky, then it's time to revisit that matter. And if you feel like you couldn't tell your birth mom, or you're not your birth mom, but the expectant mom, if you feel like you couldn't disclose with her anything about the fundraising, or if you feel like you would have to keep it a secret from the child one day, then maybe you revisit. I do think that the main issue in this is not the fundraising, but the cost of adoption in general. People are paying $40,000, $50,000, $60,000 plus. In a lot of situations with facilitators, and some attorneys are charging that much. It's absurd. And so I think that's definitely the main issue. A lot of women have said, well, if you're spending all this money, why couldn't you just give it to the expectant mom? And that's not the point. But it is something to think about. A lot of times financial hardship is the top reason that a woman chooses to place her child. And, this lack of financial stability combined with this moment of single motherhood is kind of heavy. So I think there's definitely ways to fundraise that are, humble. And what I typically think is a little sketchy is when I see them fundraising for the entire amount. The entire amount is like 50 plus. That's troubling to me. I kind of, as an adoption professional now, I basically, I want to see that you're committing to tightening your budget since you've decided to adopt. And I want to see that, you're fundraising in an appropriate way. I've seen on Instagram some people fundraise by doing a giveaway and making it really, it's just, I don't desensitize the process when you're fundraising. I think that's kind of the point.
Interesting. I didn't realize you had written an article. If you'll send me the link, I will include it with the show notes. Okay. Another topic that we get questions for is adoptive parents, adoptive moms who want to induce lactation so that they can nurse their adopted child. Let me be honest up front that it is not always, in fact, usually you're not able to produce enough breast milk to fully support the child. So oftentimes you're also having to supplement through formula. But for some adoptive parents, adoptive moms, it gives them an added sense of bonding or whatever. So, and they would want to try it and they want to do it. So I'd like to hear, but the counter argument is that, so how do birth parents feel about this? So Katie, let me start with you. How would you feel about, how do you feel about adoptive moms inducing lactation or trying to induce lactation so that they can breastfeed?
Yeah, so I've dealt with this a number of times as a professional working, kind of in the agency setting with families and the expectant parents. And I think I kind of have a theme, but my theme is always just honesty and, giving that information. So if a prospective adoptive mom wants to do this, then I think in that time where you're kind of meeting or getting to know that expectant parent, she should be forthright with that information. So she has the opportunity to explain how she's come to this decision, why she wants to do this. And then that allows that expectant mom to have the time to process that information and decide if she's comfortable with that. So I've had a problem professionally when it's been this secret. We're telling you as the professional, but we don't want her to know. Well, that's been really troubling for me because that's not okay. Why, if you're keeping this kind of information secret from her, what else are you going to keep from her over the years? A secret.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. If you have a theme of honesty, it's not a bad theme to have. So just saying,
Yeah.
just throwing it out there. Kelsey, what are your thoughts on adoptive breastfeeding?
As an adoption professional, I'm like completely on board with Katie. As a birth mom, I'm just going to be blunt. I think it's so weird. And it's so bizarre in my birth mom mind. I've seen this discussion across a couple like Facebook groups for birth moms, and it's typically the same theme across of opinion. In response to that, I don't understand it, and I've tried to, and I just don't think that I ever will. But I do agree. It's not my choice at the same time. So if that does arise in my professional work, that's the way, definitely I agree with Katie, and that's the way we handle it. So.
Yeah. But your blunt reaction as a birth mom is, ew, huh?
I hear about it. I'm just going to turn my phone off.
Laura, your thoughts on adoptive moms breastfeeding?
I don't have adoption professional experience here, so I'm just of the birth mom perspective, and I agree with Kelsey. That's weird, and I don't really want to know about it. If you want to induce lactation and try and breastfeed the child, go for it. Cool, but I don't need to know. That's your world, dude.
Yeah, and I think this is Katie again. I think I've only become okay with it because I now parent 3 children and I did nurse them. But prior to parenting a child, I would have felt like Kelsey and Laura, it would have been weird. So that's why I think you as the adoptive mother have to be honest and provide some reasoning why, and kind of not education, like don't preach to her, but what does this mean for you? What is this doing for you?
Mm-hmm. Okay. All right. And Katie, this may be less relevant to you because I'm not sure openness then was the fact that there was contact information being shared. But so this is probably more for the Kelsey and Laura who have more recently placed. How was openness described to you? And is the reality worked out to be how it was described, or did they paint the picture with and all roses and unicorns and things like that, and the reality has not worked out to be that way? Laura, we'll start with you.
So my agency was really good about describing their different levels of openness as far as their definitions go. So they described closed is closed, there's no contact. Semi is updates, regular updates, and they kind of describe the schedule of those, lessening by the time they get to 13. And then once they turn 13, it's their decision whether they want to continue updates. And then complete open adoption had that same update schedule as the semi, but it also included contact with the family. And that's obviously the one I chose. The paperwork described 1 visit a year as their minimum open requirement, and for their adoptive families. And I thought I was going out on a limb and asking for 2 visits a year, and then they blew my mind and said every other month. So for me, my expectations and my expectations have far been overachieved, I should say, and I'm grateful for it. However, that I know that is not the case across the board. I have heard from several of my now friends as I've grown into found my people in the birth mom community here in Georgia, which is so exciting. But as I've talked with them, unfortunately, they will have an understanding of an openness, and they've placed a few years ago too, and yet their families have just completely dropped the ball and not completed their end of the open adoption, and unfortunately, they just go years without hearing anything or any updates. So I am fortunate that fortunate in saying this, but it breaks my heart. Well, at the same time, that my open adoption my expectations and my reality are unfortunately an outlier out there.
And that raises an interesting issue. And so I'll point this to you, Kelsey. Were you aware that it would be very hard to, I don't even know if there was a specific contract, a post-adoption openness contract, but even if there was, were you aware that you would probably have a very hard time enforcing it? Was that something that you felt like you understood that it was a handshake type of agreement, not necessarily one you could enforce?
We didn't have post-adoption contact agreements in Indiana. They're not allowed. And I was aware that this was all by, this informal, agreement. Agreement isn't even the proper word because it wasn't, but it wasn't enforceable. I knew that. They told me that. And I guess with the previous question too, is when I went into this, I said I wanted an open adoption, and the attorney gave me, the stack of profiles to look through. And when I met this family and when I talked to them on the phone, I told them that, I wanted open adoption. And my understanding of an open adoption was not with visits. It was just pictures and letters, because that's what the attorney informed me. And when they brought up visits, I told the attorney, and the attorney was like, well, you might have to pick a new family then if you want visits, because that felt like I had asked for too much.
Even though they brought it up?
Yeah.
Wow.
Bizarre. But yeah. But the attorney definitely made me feel like I had asked for the moon and the stars by asking for visits.
Or any contact. Interesting.
Mm-hmm.
So, Katie, let's talk with you some about the, again, not from your personal experience, but having as a social worker and working in adoption, do you feel like that expectant parents understand that as after the adoption, the control resides, even in my opinion, even when there is a post-adoption agreement, that the power resides with the adoptive families. Do you think that agencies do a decent job of explaining that to expectant parents when they're making these choices?
So are you talking about the contact agreements or like their relinquishment or consent documents?
No, contact agreements. The others are, thank you for making that clarification. No, not relinquishment of parental rights. That's a legal document that is absolutely enforceable. I'm talking about post-adoption contact openness agreements.
So I think it really varies on the professional that is drafting that for the birth parents. In California, we do have what are called, they are enforceable contact agreements. Of course, they would never overturn the adoption, but they are enforceable and, can result in mediation or even court. Yeah,
but it's hard. Yes, you're correct. But it's going to be and I haven't looked at the case law in California, and it's possible that you're right, that a judge would force adoptive parents, but all an adoptive parent has to say, it seems to me, is that it's not in their child's best interest, and ultimately that's the standard that we use for judging. So I don't know. You're in California and probably know more. So,
well, I do know that there's more and more cases going to court, and even potentially, I don't know if they do trial. I would have to ask the attorneys that I know that are, working on these. But I think that it really depends on that attorney that sat and created that document with the birth parent. I know that there's a lot of birth parents that think that their contact agreements were filed in court, and they never were. And so you can't even do anything about that. So I do think there's no standard like proper care in this. It really depends on who that person got connected to.
Yeah. Okay. And so it's probably across the board. And we hope that leads us directly into the question about ethics and ethical adoption practices that both expectant parents as well as adoptive parents are aware of when they're choosing adoption professionals, be they an adoption agency or an adoption attorney. Katie, let's start with you then. What are some hallmarks of an ethical agency or attorney that both sets of parents, adoptive and birth or expectant, should look for when they're choosing?
For me, first and foremost, that an ethical adoption professional believes in providing the expectant parent with her own representation, her own legal representation. It's not required in every state, but I think it should be a standard of practice that she has her own attorney. This is, technically contract law, and yet in any other contract in a legal setting, both parties would be provided with their own attorney, and that does not happen in adoption. In fact, expectant parents think that the attorney that they got connected to is their attorney, and they really are not. They're the adoptive parent's attorney. That's first and foremost for me. Yeah.
Okay. Laura, things that expectant and adoptive parents, because of course we want both sides to be looking for ethical professionals to guide them. So what are some things that they should look for?
I would agree with the attorney that the expectant mother is provided an attorney if she'd like one to represent her interests. I agree it is contract law, so there's two sides to the party here. Two parties to the contracts that both need equal and adequate representation. As far as for me, I'm very detail oriented. So when I made my decision, I looked up 3 different agencies to basically interview as far as who do I want to place through. And the first one I went to very quickly off the bat, she saw my belly. I was 7 months along, and she in the first 15-minute meeting, and the only other contact I had with her was maybe a 5-minute conversation to set up this meeting. She presented me with 3 or 4 different profiles and almost expected me to make a decision as far as what family I was going to place my child into. And I felt extremely pressured and extremely awkward with it all. It's she did not know me. She did not know my story other than the maybe total 20 minutes that she'd known me. So any kind of rush to make a decision, no matter how far along the mother is, that makes me extremely uncomfortable. And as far as my coaching for expectant mothers out there, make sure that when you walk in, that you feel comfortable and confident in their ability to hear you out and heed your word and respect your word, and that they respect you and your story. And that would be for the birth mother side, or the expectant mother side, I should say. And then on the the adoptive family side, that they understand where their funds are going. It is a very expensive process, and they need to make sure that they have a procedure in place. So when the child is born, they need to make sure that the agency knows to put the child on Medicare or Medicaid, whichever it is. I can't keep them straight. But Medicaid. Okay, Medicaid. And then that there's a procedure in place and a policy in place for them to backdate the insurance and everything like that, that they have that the post-birth procedure down to a T, and that they can walk them through every step of the way before there's even a birth. Because that was an issue with my adoption and unfortunately, however, I will say that my agency has addressed all those issues and everything's good. But when going through it, that was really uncomfortable, and they felt extremely uncomfortable in that whole situation. And it's such a gut-wrenching decision to place, and then such a huge decision to adopt, that all the parties should feel comfortable and confident in the ability of the agency.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Kelsey, what would you look for for ethics, an ethical adoption professional, be it an attorney or an agency?
I think the most important thing across the board is that they need to be doing more than the bare minimum. And what I mean when I say that is we set these new standards like every day for these ethical agencies. Ethical is like this buzzword in adoption now. Everybody wants to seem ethical because that's what adoptive parents are looking for in an agency. So agencies will list like, oh, we offer post-placement support on their website. And then you get into it and you find out they really don't. Or they offer 3 counseling sessions and that's it. So post-placement support is huge. It needs to be offered, and it needs to be offered several times, pre and post-placement. And that can look like support groups. It can look like counseling. And if they don't have the resources to do it in office, then they should for sure be sending it out, send out referrals to places. Separate legal representation is huge for me, but we need more than the bare minimum, in that we need more than just their buddy attorney who is just gonna, explain the terms in favor of the adoptive parent's attorney. And we need an attorney that's working for her. That is filling the space of a real attorney, just like in any other situation. I mean, there's other little things, but to me, those are the main things. And then cost, I really don't want to ever see something more than $45,000. Like if there's medical issues, but like a standard adoption, and I'm being generous with the $45,000 because ideally I want it a lot lower, but I don't want to see those at all.
I'm so thankful that you talked about, all of them, all of your points, but the post-adoption counseling, and not just for the first month after the birth. It's a lifetime decision. And it's so important that the adoption professional community, the adoption industry, realizes that birth parents need to have options for counseling long into the adoption, because we certainly know that feelings about adoption change and they come and they go. I mean, your needs come and they go. So anyway, it's such a good point. Let me remind people that this show is brought to you not only through our underwriters, but also through our partners. And our partner agencies are those that believe in our mission of providing unbiased, accurate information pre and post adoption. And they do more than just, give lip service to it. They actually put their money behind it. And that means supporting us, and that their support allows us to bring you this show. Some of our wonderful partners include Adoptions from the Heart. They have built over 6,000 families since 1985 through domestic infant adoption. They work with families across the U.S., but they're licensed in Pennsylvania, New Jersey, New York, Delaware, Virginia, and Connecticut. And we also have Vista Del Mar. They are a licensed nonprofit adoption agency with over 65 years of experience helping to create families. They offer home study only services, but they also offer full service infant adoption, international adoption, and foster to adopt programs. I want to thank you so much for the 3 birth moms that we've had with us today, Kelsey Vandervliet, Katie Monroe, and Laura Blanco. I have truly appreciated your time and your wisdom and your patience in answering what may seem like redundant questions to you, or even silly questions, but these are questions that adoptive parents and adoption professionals should be asking, and adoptive parents are asking. So thank you so much for your time and your willingness to share. Let me mention that the views expressed in this show are those of the guest and do not necessarily reflect the position of Creating a Family, our partners, or our underwriters. Also, keep in mind that the information is general advice. To understand how it applies to your specific situation, you need to work with your adoption professional. Thanks for joining us today, and I will see you next week.